I still remember that morning like it was branded into my spine. The clock on the wall already showed 9:15 when I burst into the classroom, my lungs burning, my backpack clutched to my chest like armor. I wasn't late because I didn't care. I was late because sometimes life doesn't ask your permission before it slows you down. Late again. Ethan. Her voice sliced through the room. Mrs. Caldwell. Sharp, cold. Precise. Like she enjoyed the sound of it. I froze beside my desk, every muscle screaming. Sitting down wasn't an option. Not today. Not with the pain still crawling across my lower back like fire under the skin. I'm sorry, I said quietly. May I stand today, please? Her eyebrows shot up as if I'd insulted her personally. Absolutely not. Sit down. Now. I swallowed. My back. It really hurts. That's when the laughter started. Oh? You're back. She mocked. Yesterday, it was a family emergency. Today it's your spine. What will it be tomorrow? I gripped my backpack harder. She didn't know. No one knew. The ruler. The sharp sting. The humiliation of being struck in front of everyone just a week earlier because I didn't stand straight enough at the board. I said sit down. She snapped, slamming her palm on the desk. I can't. The room went dead silent, and that silence was louder than any laugh. Mrs. Caldwell smiled, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Well, then, she said softly, too softly, since you're feeling so special today, why don't you show us just how special you are? She erased the simple algebra problem from the board and replaced it with something else. Symbols, curves, integrals. A battlefield of mathematics I wasn't supposed to recognize. This, she announced, is a calculus problem for my 11th grade advanced class. Laughter exploded behind me. You have 5 minutes, she continued, checking her watch. Solve it, or enjoy a week of detention. My heart pounded, but underneath the fear, something else stirred, recognition. Because while everyone else saw chaos, I saw patterns. They didn't know about the library. They didn't know about the evenings I spent slipping between dusty shelves while other kids played video games. They didn't know about Mrs. Turner, the librarian, who smiled every time she saw me reach for the math section like it was home. They didn't know my walls weren't covered with posters. They were covered with equations. They didn't know I'd found an abandoned calculus textbook months ago and fallen in love with the logic of it. They didn't know I taught myself derivatives by phone light so I wouldn't wake my little sister. They didn't know numbers made sense when people didn't die, so I stepped toward the board. Someone snickered. Someone whispered, he's actually trying. I picked up the marker. My hands shook, not from doubt, but from the weight of being seen. And then, the noise disappeared, the pain faded, the room vanished. There was only the problem, and me, substitution, transformation. Flow.my hand moved faster, cleaner, confident. The laughter died mid-breath. When I finished, I underlined the answer twice and turned around. Mrs. Caldwell stared at the board like it had betrayed her. That's impossible, she stammered. Where did you copy this from? I solved it, I said. She ripped the paper from my hands, tore it in half. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Principal's office. Now, as I walked out, I didn't look back, but I felt it. The shift, the confusion, even respect, flickering where cruelty used to live. Outside the principal's office. I waited. Again, like always, through the door. I heard her voice. Accusations. Certainty. Confidence built on years of never being questioned. When I was finally called in, I told the truth. They didn't believe me. Not until someone else walked through the door. Ms. Harper, the science teacher. She saw me. She remembered my project. The equations. The models. The work no one else had bothered to notice. And when they asked me why I couldn't sit down, I showed them. The welt said what my voice couldn't. That moment changed everything. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't invisible anymore. And I walked out knowing one thing. Tomorrow, they'd test my mind. But today, they finally saw my pain. When the door closed behind the teachers, the room finally exhaled. It was just me, the test, and the quiet hum of the lights above. No laughter. No whispers. No eyes waiting for me to fail. I took a breath and looked down. The first problem was almost insulting. Basic algebra. I solved it in seconds. The next one too. By the time I reached the end of the first page, I felt something strange. Not arrogance, not anger, calm. The kind of calm that comes when you know exactly who you are. Even if the world hasn't caught up yet. Page 2. Trigonometry. Easy. Page 3. Pre-calculus. Familiar ground. When I turned to page 4 and saw the calculus problems, my pulse skipped, not from fear, but from recognition. I'd walked these paths before. Late nights. Scribbled notebooks. Quiet conversations with someone who believed in me. Outside, I could almost hear Mrs. Caldwell pacing, convincing herself this was all a mistake. Inside, I disappeared into the language of numbers that I didn't rush. I explained my steps. Sometimes I solved the same problem 2 different ways, not to show off, but because it felt honest, like telling the full truth instead of just enough to pass. When I finished, I looked up at the clock. 40 minutes. I raised my hand and asked for more paper. The principal's eyebrows lifted when he came back in. "You're done?" he asked. "Yes, sir. I just wanted space to explain my reasoning." I handed him the pages, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small while waiting to eat lunch. The hallway buzzed. People looked at me differently, not like I was a problem, but like I was a question they suddenly wanted the answer to. When I was called back into the office, I noticed the cushion on the chair. That tiny detail almost broke me. They had read my test. All of it. Perfect scores. Multiple solutions. Clean logic.ms. Harper smiled at me like a proud older sister. Mrs. Caldwell didn't smile at all. "She must have been coached," she said, her voice sharp. "No child thinks like this." That's when the door opened, and there he was. Dr. Alan Brooks. My mentor. My anchor. The first adult who had ever looked at my work and said, "You're not strange. You're gifted." He spoke calmly, clearly, honestly. He explained that talent doesn't ask for permission, that some minds see patterns the way others see colors, that brilliance doesn't disappear just because it makes someone uncomfortable. The room changed. I didn't have to defend myself anymore. The truth stood on its own. The principal apologized to me, out loud, and something inside my chest unlocked. What followed moved fast. Investigations, meetings, conversations, whispered in hallways. Mrs. Caldwell was suspended, then removed. My parents were called in, not because I was in trouble, but because someone had finally failed me. I watched my father's hands shake with anger as he looked at the photos of my back. I watched my mother cry, not because I was hurt, but because I'd carried it alone. The school board meeting was packed. Cameras, voices, heat. I sat there wishing I could disappear again. But this time, I didn't. People spoke. Students apologized. Teachers admitted they'd looked away. And then the decision was announced. Termination. Policy changes. Zero tolerance. Justice doesn't roar. It settles. Slow. Heavy. Final point. 3 months later, everything felt different. New posters on the walls. New programs. New conversations. I went to the high school 3 mornings a week for advanced math. I helped younger kids after class. I learned that being seen doesn't always mean being exposed. Sometimes it means being understood. One afternoon, as I explained equations to a group of 6th graders, I realized something. I wasn't invisible anymore, and I wasn't angry either. I was free. As I walked past the old classroom, now filled with laughter and movement instead of fear, I understood that the day I was meant to be humiliated became the day everything changed, not because I was a genius, but because the truth refused to stay quiet. And maybe that's the real lesson. When you finally stand up, even when it hurts, the world has no choice but to adjust.